When President-elect Joe Biden delivers his inaugural address tomorrow, he won't be the first president to face a nation in crisis. But the challenges that he has ahead of him may be tougher than ever. The country is still in the grips of a pandemic, visualized by flags filling the National Mall, representing Americans who cannot attend the inauguration in person. And Joe Biden is hoping to unite a nation that is deeply divided, with the specter of political violence forcing the ceremony to be behind barbed wire and under the watch of thousands of National Guard troops. Joining me now is Michael Gerson, former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and a Washington Post opinion columnist, and Washington Post opinion columnist Eugene Robinson. Welcome both. Well, Michael Gerson, first to you, because you have the distinction of having written George W. Bush's inaugural addresses. I wanted to play a little bit of his and Barack Obama's inaugural speeches, hitting on themes of unity and healing the country.
My solemn pledge: I will work to build a single nation of justice and opportunity.
Starting today, we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and begin again the work of remaking America.
So contrast that with Donald Trump's American Carnage speech, and you get the importance, Michael, of setting a different tone this time.
No, absolutely. It's going to be a moment of high drama, not just because of the place it's given, but because that place was occupied just days ago by enemies of democracy. And I think he needs to speak words of healing at a moment of profound division in our country. The best inaugural addresses, when you go back and look at the history, really had that theme of national unity, of outreach, of common and shared future. And I think that's the theme that he's going to have to mine. And
we just heard this remarkable comments, really, from Mitch McConnell. Eugene, I wanted to ask you about this. Let's play Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor, opening the Senate floor today.
The mob was fed lies. They were provoked by the president and other powerful people. And they tried to use fear and violence to stop a specific proceeding of the first branch of the federal government, which they did not like. But we pressed on. We stood together and said an angry mob would not get veto power over the rule of law in our nation, not even for one night.
Do you pick up any signals there as to what direction he might be going in?
Well, it doesn't sound very good for the president there. It sounds like there might be a vote for conviction because he said the president, along with other powerful people who include Republican members of the Senate, Mitch McConnell's colleagues, Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, provoked this crowd by feeding them lies. And that's certainly, it's absolutely true. Fascinating, Mitch McConnell, as you know, doesn't say much unless he means to say it, and knows exactly what signals and messages he's sending when he does speak. And I think he is it's still angry at what happened on January 6th, angry at the president and angry at his fellow GOP senators who went along with the big lie.
And, Michael, another tradition being tossed out is any meeting between the incoming and outgoing first families. No coffee at the White House, which is traditional. No tour of the residence by Melania for Jill Biden. We've seen photos, of course, of the Bushes and the Bush daughters showing the Obama daughters, some of their secret favorite places in the White House and how to slide down the banister. All of those welcoming moments, which have been part of the sort of the culture of America, to see that, even Dwight Eisenhower and JFK rode together up to the Capitol from the White House, barely speaking, but at least they were together in the same car. That none of that's going to take place. Does it matter?
I think it does matter. I think this president has taken a lot of the grace notes of American life, the non-legal element of our constitutional order, and thrown it out the window in a way that is graceless and damaging to the future of the country. But the good thing is that I think that President Joe Biden really specializes in those kind of grace notes. in reaching out to people in a personal and human way. And I think that if anybody can restore that kind of spirit in the aftermath of this president, I think that Joe Biden might be the person for the job.
And Eugene, I wanted to play, speaking of grace notes, Jenna Bush Hager interviewed Ashley Biden, her first TV interview, network TV interview. And after all this time when, of course, the Trumps have been, and allies have been going after the Bidens and their family, this is what Ashley Biden had to say today.
What were the darkest moments like for you all? It hurts, right? But you also know the truth. It's like at the end of the day, they may get it wrong, but at least I got it right. You know, at least I know the real deal. I know, you know, the type of man my father is and the woman my mother is and the man my brother is.
Eugene, that was very touching. First daughter to first daughter.
It was. Yeah, and I think that's why Joe Biden, I think that's really why Joe Biden won. I think we all know who Joe Biden is. We've known him for a long, long time, and he wears it on his sleeve. You know, he is who he is. I think this is you know, in what, 23 hours and 15 minutes or whatever, but who's counting? You know, I think that will be a very, very hopeful moment. It is not written that the next president or the president after that or the one after that will be like Donald Trump, will be anything like Donald Trump. It is not written that we cannot recapture some of these, some of the traditions, some of the comedy that we had in past years. It's up to us. It won't be easy, but it's in our hands, and I think it's a very hopeful.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.